Stay up to date with what's happening in North Central Washington. Go to the NCW Life Community Calendar at ncwlife.com.
Welcome once again to Let's Learn here on the NCW Life channel. I'm Eric Granstrom, your host, and on this program we learn about all types of different topics, including taxes. And that's what you've tuned in for today as we continue our tax tips series with Cordell Nair & Company. And joining us to help us with this navigation through the tax laws, we have Pete Luchini, who's a certified public accountant with Cordell Nair. And today we're focusing in on if you do business in Washington, well, here's some things you need to know about for 2018 as we finish up 2017, Pete. And I don't know, is it all bad? Is it all depressing? I mean, I guess it depends on what kind of business you own and operate here in the state of Washington.
This is one where I would say it actually probably doesn't depend. It's nothing what I would characterize as good. You know, because it's taxes paid, which always affects business owners' bottom line. So
absolutely.
I don't really have any good news, but I do have some explanations that might be helpful. So.
All right. Well, that's good. We've been hearing a lot about this conversation, but not about the specifics on unless you've been in contact with your CPA to talk about it or your bookkeeper to talk about it. Right. So let's get into some of the major topics of concern for business owners here in Washington State.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of tax to talk about. Washington's a fairly heavily taxed state for businesses. You know, we have a Department of Revenue that collects all the sales tax. They also collect what's called a B&O tax, a business and occupations tax, and I always tell people that's just for the sheer joy of doing business in Washington State. And they also collect a bunch of taxes. There is a litter tax, there is a lodging tax, there's bottled water tax, there's a hazard tax, then there's excise tax. Excise would be on the things that you, merchandise that you bought with your reseller certificate, so you didn't pay tax on it, but then you used it in the business instead of reselling it. And so there's a lot of compliance related to that kind of stuff. And they usually, the Department of Revenue puts you into a rotation, and they'll hit you with a Department of Revenue audit every so many years. And it's just a good practice to keep your records in order.
I know previous job I had working for the county, it was every other year. How often is it for private business, would you say?
I don't think it's quite that often. I would say if you don't hear from a revenue officer within 3 to 5 years, then you might want to buy a lottery ticket because you've got some good luck.
The good news about that, at least when I had any dealings with the Department of Revenue here with the state through the county, it was kind of, okay, we're looking into what we had before on the books as far as things you needed to improve upon, and here's a new area we want to look at. And it wasn't onerous necessarily, it was just their P's and Q's and dotting your I's and crossing your T's.
Yeah, and they're, in many ways they try to be helpful, and if they find something in your favor, and you'll get a tax refund issued. So it's not super painful. I still recommend contacting your CPA, let them know you're getting an audit, get some pointers, representation if you think you need it. So it's never a bad idea.
The interesting part about that audit is you have to pay for their time, right?
No.
No, we don't?
Mm-mm.
Oh, as an individual? Because I know in the county we had to pay for the revenue person to come out and do it.
No, well, at least not that to my knowledge.
All right. Well,
I've
good.
never paid for one.
Ooh, okay. So, of the, we're going to dive into these a little more too. Yeah. Are these the same? Is it new? I mean, B&O. I mean,
all that stuff's the same. Okay. L&I is the same, which is what workman's comp. Washington's one of those states that has a state-run workman's comp. Many of the other states have gone to a private insurance workman's comp. I don't know that will happen anytime soon, as much as I may wish it to be. Employment Security is the unemployment office, and so they collect unemployment. We just have a number of taxes in this state.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a lodging tax. Is that across the board, or does that depend on where you are?
It depends on where you are.
Okay.
So your locale, you'll have a local, and then there's a state. I don't know actually what the state is. I mean, that's kind of getting in the weeds for me. I'd have to look it up.
Is that lumped into other taxes you pay to the state, or is that a specific line?
I think it's a specific line on your Department of Revenue filing.
Okay,
So,
all right. All right.
yeah.
We'll have to watch for lodging tax.
Yeah.
And that's specifically, and it's interesting that I would think that that would be not across the board, that would be specific to those businesses doing business in the lodging world.
I mean, it's basically, yeah.
Or in tourism,
right.
for example.
It's heavily meant for tourism, right? Particularly areas like Leavenworth.
But me as a plumber, I got to pay a lodging tax?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
No. This is just for the people in that industry.
Right.
Yeah, you're off the hook.
You scared me there for a minute.
I know. Sorry about that.
The state versus Fed, when we're looking at unemployment, is that all staying the same? Are we getting an uptick on that? Where are we on that?
That stays the same. You know, the thing to know about that is that if you're an owner or an officer, you can exempt yourself from unemployment for state purposes. You can't for federal. And then same with L&I, you can exempt yourself from that as well. So that's kind of nice. If you don't know it, some people are paying unemployment on themselves when they're the owner and they don't need to.
Okay. Now, so far, it's no new news. So it's, I mean, it's the same. We've been, if we've been doing business in Washington, we know that this is the greatest state in the world. We love this state.
We do.
But it's not the most business-friendly state.
It's a little tricky.
Yeah.
Well, you know, they passed the minimum wage law a couple years ago.
See, I knew you were going to hit us with something.
And so while the law has actually been around for a little while, it had provisions that will tick up the minimum wage each year. So it was originally pushed up to 11, and then for 2018 it's 11.50. For 2019 it goes to, I believe, is it 12? I wrote it down, 12. And then in the final year, which I think is 2020, it goes to 13.50, which is, you know, substantially higher than federal minimum wage. I think that's about $7.25. So it's a bit of a hit, especially for a labor-intense industry. It's challenging to cover it. You know, prices will likely go up in order to compensate for that, which, you know, everybody will probably be aware of. So that minimum wage law is challenging. And then
and that was 2016 legislative session?
Yeah,
where
I believe that's when it happened.
They enacted that.
Right.
So that's what it is right now.
Right.
There could be a repeal. There could be in addition to it. I mean.
Well, that's what I always tell people. The tax law that exists right now is all we know. That's for sure. We don't even know what will be next year or tomorrow, really.
Let's take a quick break, and we'll get you some more news, bad, possibly, coming your way as we continue with tax tips. And Pete Luchini with Cordell Nair & Company as we continue on Let's Learn next on the NCW Life channel.
Please join us weekly for the 12th District with yours truly, Kerry Condata. Check your channel guide for times or go to ncwlife.com for details.
Welcome back to Let's Learn here on the NCW Life channel. I'm Eric Grandstrom along with Pete Luchini, certified public accountant with Cordell Nair & Company, and principal. It says on the website principal. What does that mean? You're a partner?
That's right.
Okay, all right. So you were responsible for some of the issues with the business then, aside from being a business person yourself on the side.
Right.
So you really, I mean, besides the fact that you do this for a living, you also are impacted as a business owner.
That's right. It gives me, I think, a unique perspective for sure. I definitely see things from both sides.
Yeah, you can commiserate with those that come in and just...
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
Speaking of that, we were talking before we went to the commercial break about onerous minimum wage kick in this year going up, next year going up again in 2019. Also, a little something different here was the mandatory paid sick leave.
Right.
Let's talk about that for the state of Washington and what that means for business owners here in Washington State.
Well, I mean, I guess I should paint the other side of that picture. These benefits go to the workers, and you know, it's great that they have more money in their pocket. It's just challenging for business owners. So the mandatory paid sick leave is has been implemented as of January 1, 2018. All employers were required to provide it to their Employees, it's basically most employees. There's very few that wouldn't be included. Those that would not be included are going to be your exempt employees, professionals, higher salary kind of situations, not your hourly workers by any stretch. And what it says is that for every 40 hours they work, they should get 1 hour of paid sick time. So that totals up.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but is that whether they're a full-time employee or not? It's just 40 hours, period.
It doesn't matter. So if they're working 20 hours a week, after that first 2 weeks of work, they will have accumulated 1 hour of paid sick leave.
Okay.
And there's just a number of rules around the paid sick leave law that I think we'll have to all get used to. You are to provide them notice either as of the start of January 1st or their hire date that they are eligible for the paid sick leave and how it is accrued, and then you are to notify them no less than once monthly what the balance is in their paid sick leave account. It equates to, I believe it's 6 days a year if they're a full-time worker, so just a little more than a week off. And there's a number of rules related to how it can be implemented. For example, the first 90 days of employment, they accrue it, but they can't use it. If they have more than 40 hours at the end of a year, if you are using a calendar year measurement period, then you can drop off anything in excess of 40 hours. If you terminate them and rehire them, you have to reinstate their paid sick leave. Oh. So there's just a lot going on. And it specifically is entitled sick leave. It's not personal leave.
Well, that is because I know a lot of employers, for example, NCW Life Channel.
Right.
It's personal leave. It's sick, whatever you got going on. If it's vacation, it's all considered personal leave time.
Right. Paid time off is what a lot of people call it, PTO. Well, that's fine, but if you choose to use paid time off in lieu of sick leave, you have to have a written policy stating that your paid time off policy intends to comply with Washington State law's paid sick leave policy, and you must be equal to the sick leave law in generosity or more generous. And so there's a few things where you kind of have to watch. If you front load your sick leave, everybody gets it at the beginning of the year, and instead of accruing it as time goes on, there's some nuances to that you have to pay attention to. Okay. So if you're doing anything outside of a very simple paid sick leave policy, you probably should consult with perhaps an accountant, but maybe even an attorney, an employment law attorney. So this is time, not a wage. It is in a way. Who's watching this? Who's watching the store, so to speak, to make sure that you're doing it? And how do they know? Well, it's gonna be subject to audit, just like anything else. So if you get caught not having it, and that's about your paperwork and making sure. Right. Yeah. And then also employees can put claims. Right, against you as an employer. So there's an anti-retaliation clause, which means that if an employee uses it, you cannot retaliate against them. And that would be through Labor and Industries, or whom would they go through to file a claim like that? I probably think it would. I don't know the answer to that, actually. Yeah, I don't know. But it will, there's a number of rules related to how they can take the sick leave. It is the notification that they can't show up to their shift is as soon as reasonably practicable, I believe is what the term the law uses. If you're not able to do so, you can have someone else contact your employer for you. You cannot require an employee to get a doctor's note unless I believe they missed 3 consecutive days of work. So there are a number of things that you want to make sure that you get right. Now, you mentioned that it doesn't roll over from one calendar year to the next? 40 hours is the maximum. Most that can carry over. You can always let them carry over more if you so choose, but if you don't, then you have to only let them have 40. So does an employer at that point towards the end of the year have to say, okay, you need to use this or you lose this type of a situation? Well, or offer that? I mean, because that could be onerous on the business if you got everybody that's taking time off at the same time. It depends on the policy. So if it's a paid time off policy and it's more generous, then likely they will let some carryover be there because that's usually how it works. But if it's truly just a straight sick leave policy meant to comply with the law, it never has to be paid out. So upon termination, they don't have to pay it out. And as well as they get to the end of the year, they don't have to, it's meant to be for sick or care of a loved one or that kind of a thing, or I believe the domestic violence issues, it's meant to be for that. And so if you don't have any of those things, then you wouldn't be technically eligible to use it. Some employers have more lax rules than that, but they should have it in their policy manual.
So I understand you talking to me about this as a business owner. Why are you talking to me about this on tax tips when it's referencing taxes and things like that?
So that's one of the many things that we've found a lot of small business owners, they're so busy doing the work that they do that they don't know what Olympia has decided for us. And so they're just not aware that these are laws that can really get them in trouble with compliance. And so we provide it as an all-around service to our clients, that we will consult with them and assist them in sort of crossing their T's and dotting their I's.
Okay. We're going to take a break and come back and talk more about this issue and more as we look into doing business in Washington for the future, for 2018 and into the future, with Cordell Nair & Company and Pete Luchini, as we continue with tax tips on the way next here on Let's Learn on the NCW Life channel.
For all the latest news in North Central Washington, go to ncwlife.com or find us on Facebook. Got a news tip? Email us at news@ncwlife.com or call 888-2020.
Welcome back to Let's Learn here on the NCW Life channel. I'm Eric Granstrom, talking with Pete Luchini from Cordell Nair & Company about doing business in Washington here with the new laws on the books for 2018. And Pete, we left off talking about the mandatory sick leave. What are you seeing businesses do in reference or deference to this new law on the books? I would imagine, especially for part-time employees, that you're going to start skinnying down their hours.
Yeah, so what I've seen just in my conversations with clients in recent months, the planning for it is some employers have eliminated a paid time off policy that they had originally and just are implementing the sick policy as is. They have some fear of having more piled on their plate, so instead of offering a little more, they're dialing it back a little less. They're concerned. Some employers are getting rid of some other perhaps benefits that they had provided employees, paring back profit sharing matches and that kind of stuff, because they've got to make the numbers still work ultimately. So we've seen some, I think, substantial changes related to the sick leave policy.
Now, the sick leave policy is on top of what we've already got on the books as far as leave time, which is different, right?
Right, if you have it. A lot of employers don't provide leave time. So this is, for all of the employees that didn't have any kind of a leave, that were in, minimum wage jobs, then they will now have something.
As we look, though, at the mandatory leave law, is this only for full-time employees? How does that work?
So are we talking about the new law for 2000?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in 2017, the legislature enacted the Paid Family Medical Leave Act for Washington State, and so that is going to be pretty much for everybody. It's kind of a darn shame for me, with my 6 kids. I feel like I missed the boat. But it's going to be, they passed the law in 17. They will start taking premiums out of people's paychecks in 19, and benefits will be available in 2020.
Okay, so
for
not for a couple more years.
Yeah, 2019 it will matter. 2018 they're just kind of figuring out the rules and working out all the kinks. But it's going to be a fairly decent sized tax on employers, 40% borne by them. However, for small businesses there is a little bit of relief in that. If you have fewer or 50 employees, you can exempt yourself from the law. So that will be really nice for the small people that don't have the margins to make up for that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and 60% will come out of people's pay, just like the L&I premium does if you pay an L&I premium. And then it's going to go into a fund. Well, the Employment Security Department, who currently handles our unemployment, is going to be the manager of that whole system. So you will then apply to them for the leave, and then they will give you benefits just like an unemployment.
Oh, okay. So you do that through the state, not through your employer?
No,
then?
you do it through the state.
Okay.
So
All
we
right.
just will collect it and remit it, just like we collect and remit everything else. And so it'll just be another one we add to the list.
I know the conversation began, this was maternity, but is that more than maternity?
It
Are we
really,
talking about?
yeah, it really is. They've expanded it to include
Major medical type of things?
yeah,
or?
anytime you have a major medical issue, I think they wrote in there bonding with a new child, or which could be a biological child or an adopted child, so long as they're under the age of 18
Okay.
for either parent. It could be
Quite an extensive paper trail that would have to go with that, I imagine.
I don't know. If that's what they're working out right now, is trying to figure
I
out
guess the
what
good
the
news is that
requirement
the employer, that's not the employer's job, that's the
That's
employee's
true.
job. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And for the employer, there's going to be some challenges because they're going to have to find someone to do that work while that person is gone.
Yeah.
And then the training sometimes can become an issue in some of these labor-intensive industries.
And it's how many weeks?
It's up to 12 weeks, and they actually have, if you have 2 different events occur in the same year, it could be up to, I believe it's 18 weeks. I think you can get an additional amount. But it's if your family members get sick. I think domestic violence stuff counts. There's a number of things that can qualify you for this leave.
So you say 40% borne by the employer, 60% borne by the employee.
That's right.
So what of, and this might not be a question you could answer, how much of their salary are they picking up while they're
don't know.
on leave? Is it is it their full salary, or
I
is it
don't
a
know.
percentage of?
I probably should know, but I don't know that
Okay.
yet. So
Okay.
I can always come back and tell you
Okay,
sometime.
and that's not just for like for example with the maternity, that's not just for the mother, that's for the father as well?
Yeah, it's for anybody.
Okay.
So, and they actually included things like urgent child care and military deployments or military exercises type of deal. So, there's usually an anti-retaliation clause. You cannot they take their job away from them if they're gone from it, and so there's a lot of protective factors in there for the employee.
So who qualifies for this?
If you work more than 820 hours during a qualifying period, so that will count you. So if you work part-time, that's fine, but if you only work 3 hours a week, then it's not going to help. But if you're working, 15 or more hours a week for the same employer, I don't know if it's for a year period. They haven't quite got that all hammered down, but then you will be eligible for it. So it's pretty broad.
So when we're talking about the sick leave or the sick time, that was 90 days. You had to be an employee for 90 days, and you couldn't do it after 90 days.
Right.
So what is this? Is this a 90-day window as well? You have to be an employee for 90 days before you can even talk about
I think they're in the rulemaking process now that will clarify all of that for us. It's all very new. It's just we like to keep our clients informed because they're going to be tax planning for this, right? They know that this is going to hit come 2019, and we want them to be ready for it.
So are we paying that? We're not paying that yet.
Not
We're paying
yet.
that come 2019.
Right.
For
assessment in 2019.
the possibility of getting it in 2020.
2020.
Or having. Now,
Right.
if you pay into it as an employer and then you have no one take it, do you get that money back?
No. Nope, it's a tax.
So then it's sitting there in a pool
Yes.
like unemployment tax.
Yes. And so if you have let's say you had a large number of workers, many of whom were older or many of whom were of childbearing age, you would have more workers that would be eligible for that benefit as opposed to another employer who had no workers that, a very exciting amount of workers taking it, then that tax covers everybody from the other place.
Okay.
It's kind of like Social Security. It just goes into a big pot.
All right. We have many more questions. What's the phone number for folks if they want to call your office?
663-1661.
Okay. Pete Luchini joining us here on Tax Tips on the NCW Life channel. For more, head to our website at ncwlife.com. Thanks for watching.
Get the fastest internet available in North Central Washington by switching to LocalTel and get speeds up to 1,000 meg. Call 888-8888 today or go online to localtel.net.